Okay, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you. If you could mute, appreciate it. Thank you very much. To the Ashford Planning and Zoning Commission for the regular meeting for August 9th, 2021. At 7:01, we're coming together. Let's see for, and this is a virtual meeting that is not hybrid or in person as of yet, and we'll have discussion on that later, but just to be clear with the legislation that's out there. For the seating of alternates, we have a full board of all 9 members here. On summer in August tells me no one's doing a lot of stuff, but that's great. And Doug as an alternate has joined us. So Doug, obviously no voting, but we appreciate your input and opinion on any of the topics. Going to the approval of minutes from the July 12th regular meeting. Is there an issue? Are any issues with the minutes at this point?
I have a just an addition under number 3, public comments. Mrs. Vargas stated she wondered why to create a lake district. Said she pays 5% tax on her lake property. I think it should be made clear that that's an out-of-town lake. It's not one of our lakes that she's talking about.
Oh, I see what you're saying, that the comment that was captured could be interpreted as being applied to an Ashford area, owned area,
Right.
as opposed to what the area she was talking about.
I believe the Ashford Lake is partially in Ashford and Eastford. But I think the real issue is that regulating what is done in the lakes is not a issue that is the responsibility of the lake associations, be it Lake Chaffee or Ashford Lake.
Well, the only addition I'd like to say is that, you know, she said she pays 5% tax on her lake property, which is not in Ashford.
So you're looking for a clarification. on that.
Exactly.
Okay. Dick, your comment, was that anything specific, or were you talking to this issue also?
It's just really to the issue. It's there was a question whether or not we should be doing this at all. And I think we had expressed the point at that time that the current land use regulations as they're written really do not apply to the small lots on Lake Chaffee or Lake Ashford. And therefore, we're trying to address those specifically. So it's a moot point whether we should or should not be doing this. It's a case that we're doing it.
Jeff, I have a 1 point. I was on at the last meeting, but you couldn't hear me. And but I did listen in, and so I just want that noted that I did attend the meeting.
Barry was online, but no audio. Okay.
Thank you.
With
And I
that-
agree
with-
with all what you did.
So with that clarification and with the addition of Jerry on, but not able to speak to us. Alex, how do you want to proceed on that regarding the minutes?
I think we just should add that to the minutes, that those were corrections that were made. Besides that, we can't do anything else about it.
Okay, so do you recommend taking a motion to accept with the corrections?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes with the correction of clarification on the public comment? and
Motion.
I'll second it.
There's addition. Okay, so that was motion by Richard Williams. Valerie?
Yes,
And seconded by Janet Bellamy.
okay.
And Valerie, I would like to commend you for the completeness of your minutes. You do a great job.
Okay, all those in favor of accepting the minutes with the clarification and the addition? Say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions, those that weren't here for the meeting need to abstain.
I'll abstain.
I'll abstain also, Jeff.
Nord, Jerry, I'm still trying to figure out what your attendance is on that, Jerry, but okay. And,
I was there, but I wasn't.
right. Okay. Okay, very good. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you for being so attentive and taking a look at those minutes. I appreciate it. We do have some of the public on here. Do we have anything open for public comment for this evening on any of the agenda items? Or anything in general regarding planning and zoning?
Yeah, I did want to say something, Jeff, if that's all right.
Okay, it's Susan Eastwood.
Susan Eastwood,
Valerie?
Waterfall Road. Well, I was just mostly on here to listen to the discussion of the affordable housing issue. And, I used to be on the board too, so I understand a lot about the way that we have zoned in the past, but I've sort of come to change my mind about the large lots. So I do commend you for all your work on that issue in the last year. But I do support the Desegregate Connecticut bill. I think that our town needs new young families and we need to encourage that. We need diversity in our town and we don't want our school to shrink down to, nothingness and so I just wanted to put in my 2 cents on that for now, mostly listening. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, Susan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Jeff, could we ask those that are joining us to identify themselves? The guests, besides Susan?
Oh,
I can identify myself. Can you hear me?
yes, we
Robert
can,
Michelle?
Robert. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Robert Michelle. I'm a resident at Ashford Lake. I'm a past board member of the Ashford Lake Property Owners Association. I'm interested in the regulations that have been promulgated at this meeting.
Thank you, Robert. And we also have, go ahead, Ms. Miller. Oh,
He's muted.
she's muted. She was off. There she comes. Nope, just changed.
Sorry, I apologize. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, I'm the director at the Ashford Senior Housing Complex. And I'm attending to listen to the affordable housing plans there.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And I think that's it from my listing here in front of me for attendees. You captured that, Valerie?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment at this point? No, thank you. Alex, any bills?
No bills.
No bills. Correspondence. We did get a correspondence from Mr. Michelle. And if you give me a second, I will call that up and read it to you. And I'll also send it to Alex at this point too. But oops, wrong way. Get past my boss's emails here. Okay. So Mr. Michelle wrote to us, sending it through Michael and the zoning, Planning and Zoning Board. Dear Jeff, I missed the announcement about the survey earlier. I looked over the results, which look pretty evenly split on all questions, or at least fairly predictable. I wonder if you could let me know what regulations are being considered at the moment. Otherwise, I would like to know when this is likely to be discussed at a zoning meeting so I can attend. As you may remember, a couple of years back, the zoning on my property at Ashford Lake caused me considerable difficulty due to the setbacks applied to my relatively small lot. So I would like to know what is now being suggested for zoning for the small lots around our lake. Also, I am concerned about runoff. Considerable water comes down the hills during the storms, and this is made worse by development as trees are removed from land and wetland areas. And of course, climate change is having a significant effect with bigger storms with more water. Hence, the regulations for runoff are of interest to me. My experience as a member of the Wetlands Commission taught me about runoff in addition to my 40-odd years of building drainage to cope with enormous runoff around my house. So I have particular interest in this topic. Also, I'd like to see a regulation that prevents owners from blocking an existing view of the lake, or at least a regulation that ensures that this is given weight when building is proposed. An outright ban is probably unreasonable. This is sincerely, Robert. I think there's a G. Yep, Robert G. Michelle, 3 Camper Drive, Ashford. So, and I was a little late in getting back to Mr. Michelle, but I did send him an email. Basically, the emails just had us kind of letting him know that we are going to having discussion and meetings on this, and that we are dealing with pretty much the areas that he touched upon: the setback size as it applies to the smaller lots, runoff and impervious surface, as well as the height and height restrictions affecting the abutting and neighboring landowners in the Lake District area. And I also called him quickly, and he was good enough to be able to join us for the discussion on the virtual meeting tonight. So thank you, Robert, for joining us. And hopefully we'll have some serious and effective discussion that helps you in your gaining input about the discussion on the Lake District regulations.
At what point would I be able to make a comment during your discussions?
Well, it's really not a hearing situation as it is a meeting. So the public comment would have been the best if you had anything specific to discuss with us at that point, as opposed to discussing it as an open hearing or a public hearing. I'm happy to go back to public comment if there's a couple of items you wish to offer up.
Yeah, if I may.
Yes, please go right ahead.
The only thing that's concerned me lately, I had a solar array approved by planning and zoning a couple of years back. It's probably going to go up this year, but that's going to exceed the proposed new height restriction. I notice you're going to a 25-foot height restriction. And I just wondered whether this height restriction, it says buildings in the proposed regulations and structures, and I don't know, how you are going to treat that when it comes to things like this solar array, whether that's different or is it going to be the same as a building, which is the way you treated it in the past. So that's one thing that is of interest to me. Otherwise, I've got no particular comments, I don't think. I've only just had a look at these regulations.
Right. And we appreciate the input. Obviously, we are still in a draft format. And as I said, we will be taking these to the district. Once we have a draft put in place that we've accepted, we're going to take it to the Lake District boards to get their input also. So,
Absolutely.
okay. Thank you very much for the input. And we'll see what type of discussion we have on that come that section of the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. So that is it for correspondence. Moving on to unfinished business. First and foremost on unfinished business has to do with how we are going to have our meetings, what format we're going to use going forward. I'm hoping that everyone had an opportunity. We've had discussion on this before, making it old business, but we've had discussion on this regarding the 3 options that the state has identified. And what we sent out or made available to the board members was the email from Catherine Silversmith, the first selectman, to all chairs of town boards, commissions, and committees. And I shared that with you folks regarding both the background and also the 3 options. Included in those 3 options has what it takes to put them in place, what the pros and cons are of each one, and that leads us to our discussion on how to follow through. Does anyone need me to go over the options or the pros and cons regarding the material that's been provided?
I don't think so, Jeff.
Okay. All right. So therefore, we are open to discussion on this. Again, just Appreciate that, Dick. I'm just gonna hit the headers on it then. The first level, and I lost my page here. Here we go. Not on the top and not on the back. Here we go. So first is in person, obviously, which is, for lack of a better term, pre-COVID, as we used to do before. And again, there are certain requirements of the back to simply in-person meeting. Then there are the fully remote, the virtual, which is what we've been doing. I guess it's not post-COVID, during COVID here, which again would be fully remote by electronic means. And the third is a hybrid, which is a combined in-person and remote meeting. So we would hold it remotely as well as having the ability to meet in person. Again, each has its pros and cons, but I'm open for discussion, questions, input from the commission and what the feelings of the commission are.
Jeff, my 2 cents worth is we have been having members of the public attend our meetings almost regularly. So and we have numerous public hearings. So I think keeping things so we're using Zoom as the prime way to have our meetings probably is the best way to do it for the moment, especially with this Delta virus thing and the potential for restricting some of the access to town buildings might be considered. So I would vote for that at this point in time.
So you're saying fully remote, as in virtual, as we've been doing during COVID?
Yep.
Okay.
I agree that with the, this is Janet, with the increase in COVID cases, it doesn't seem like a good time to go to in-person meetings. If some people want to do it in person, I would prefer to go to the hybrid method because I don't feel comfortable meeting in a room with people.
Okay, so first was virtual or hybrid, if others. Okay, thank you, Janet.
I have to agree with Dick and Janet. I'm in favor of the remote meetings for now.
And this is Jerry, I agree with, I'll agree with that also.
Hey, Jeff, my 2 cents is that we went to a hybrid method, and then people that were comfortable meeting in person could meet in person, and we could make arrangements for those that aren't comfortable to dial in via Zoom.
Jeff, I have a question on in person and the hybrid. Who's going to run the meeting in person?
Well, if it's in person, you're talking about the
Hybrid.
recording?
If we're going to have a hybrid, they have some people in person and other ones. Okay, so say I don't want to go to a meeting being there in person. I mean, who's going to be running the meeting in person at the town hall?
Well, that's part of the discussion and the cons regarding, because we do need someone to be responsible for the setup of the equipment for the meeting. We also need, those people need to be trained in the use of the technology and responsible for the meeting happening without interruption, as well as protocols that would have to be established to ensure decorum and fair participation between those people that are in person and the remote. I call it herding cats, in other words, and being able to monitor or have someone assigned besides maybe the chair in that case to assist and monitor, whether it's the virtual side or the in-person side, to make sure everyone has their voice heard, you know, that they're not limited because they weren't seen in the virtual setting, or if it's in virtual and they weren't seen in the in-person setting. So there is technology that's being worked with between Mike's company as well as the And that's, I'm sorry, Mike, is that Teich or Teat?
Mikey.
Tyke, Planning and Policy Group.
How do you spell that?
TYCHE. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, that, there's a good point being brought up. If we went to hybrid, just say for argument, that means we would be meeting in the room, in the town hall. Someone would be running the meeting, and let's say that's Jeff. But let's say Jeff says, I want to come in by Zoom. How does that happen?
Well, that's why, I mean, number one, generally speaking, if the board makes a decision that they're going to have a hybrid or, meeting, that the folks that are going to be in person, we have to know when we advertise the meeting as a hybrid that there are members of the commission that wish to actually participate as a hybrid, because if we call this a hybrid meeting or a virtual meeting, but we have a quorum of commissioners that's participating in town hall, it's not a virtual meeting. We have to know kind of how that's going to go. I ran into this in Willington because everything changed with having to wear masks, and the commission decided they didn't want to attend in person because they didn't want to be 6 feet apart with masks. So they all said, I'll stay from home. So I was in the building by myself. But that's a long way of saying multiple people need to know how to run this so that we aren't left hanging. But it's going to be some time before the technology is in place in town hall. So there's a little bit of a time where we can plan for that.
That really speaks to the point that we're better off staying the way we're doing it right now for the time being.
I think that in some of the meetings that I've watched, one of the things that's really challenging if you're a member of the public watching the meetings, if you have 3 members or 4 members of the board that are all sitting in a room, if they're all having to wear masks right now, it's very hard to figure out who's talking because you can't see their mouths moving, and trying to figure out who's talking and making sure everybody is on camera while we're all having to wear masks makes it a little bit harder to follow. And so a lot of boards are electing to just stay virtual for the time being.
Okay. So in that answering your question, Alex, do you have, well, I mean, we haven't officially taken out. Do you have any other input regarding?
Well,
meeting?
I really,
Thank you,
still
Mike.
try to understand how it's going to be run. If you're going to run, I'm going to run it. It's right now it could be chaotic trying to run a meeting until we get a better system that we know about. And I would like to probably just stay at the Zoom like we're doing right now until we get this new system figured out, so we can see how everybody can participate, even remote and in person.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Any other members of the board? What do we have here? Catherine or Mark, any input?
No, that's fine. I'm good.
Well, I would have preferred hybrid, but after leaving, listening to the discussion, leaving it at Zoom probably makes the most sense right now.
I think we will get to hybrid, but as Mike said, we're still trying to get the technology in. We'll need to get our protocols put together. We'll need to get our procedures put together on that. So that could be, at least 2 meeting sessions, maybe more like 3, well into the fall before we are up and running and have people trained and have backups trained and things like that to deal with the equipment and the methodology. Again, hybrid does allow for the pros of being in person with sharing eye-to-eye discussion and things like that, but it also gives the virtual access, because many more people, I seem to think we have a lot more people attending our meetings through virtual. I don't know if it's the topics we're talking about or if it's just our smiling faces, but we seem to have more public attendance when it comes to being virtual than in our in-person meetings, if I can remember before the virtual meetings.
Yeah,
So-
Jeff, and I think that where we tend to have a lot of public hearings, I think doing the Zoom lends better for the public hearings.
Mhm.
I mean, we had last meeting, there must have been, I know, 6 or 8 people attending via Zoom at least, and we had 2 public hearings within our meeting. So I mean, as long as we have public hearings frequently, I think the Zoom is a better way to go.
And with, I know it's only August now, but as the weather gets worse too, you can't hurt yourself in a Zoom meeting coming into a meeting. So.
Would you like a motion, Jeff?
Yes, I was just going to ask for that, Janet.
So I'll make a motion that we continue with the Zoom virtual meetings until further notice.
And I'll second that, Janet.
Okay, that was Janet and Richard seconding. Valerie?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor of staying with virtual meetings, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Opposed.
That
Who was
was
that?
Mark.
That was Jeff
Oh, that
Schillinger.
was Jeff. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. And abstentions? So moved, 8-1. All right, that piece of, and I will send an email out to the Selectman's office to let them know what our decision was for ours, for our meetings going forward.
You can talk to Catherine tonight.
Believe me, she'll get the information faster if I send her an email. Okay,
Nice.
item 6B on the unfinished business, the Lake District regulations, which again were provided in our update. Mike, do you wish to speak to these to start?
Sure. So after the last meeting, it kind of gone through some of the stuff that we were talking about tweaking, and we made a couple of additions related to moving in more of a direction to deal with water quality and drainage and impervious coverage and runoff. So I sent the draft over to Ken Slater for review because the commission had, we had basically said it was at that point where we were ready to have it reviewed. And I know he was away. I haven't heard anything back yet, but the next step will be that we do a referral to CROG and NECOG, and then we can schedule the actual public hearing. So that then it'll be, officially we can discuss it. And there, for anybody listening, I mean, there's still time at that point for us to modify the regulation. We're just sort of workshopping it at this point, but that's the next step.
Mike, I know it's sometimes it might be too many cooks, but I think we had said that we would gain their input from the boards. Is this something we can send out to Mike? And I'm sorry, I don't know the president. I'm not familiar with the name of the president of the Ashford Lake board.
Yeah, I had sent originally, my previous discussions were with Mike and Tom Barry.
Tom, thank you.
So, yeah, I think that when we do the referral to the regional agencies and set the hearing date, at that point, we can send it to them and say, we've got the hearing scheduled, because I've got to schedule it out 35 days. So I'll basically say, this is where we're at. We've got this public hearing, so we want you to review it and bring your comments to the meeting.
Okay, so basically they would have approximately 35 days prior to the hearing announcement?
Right, because if they
You
have.
have to get it to CROG and the NECOG, yeah, exactly.
Right, but that
Yep.
way if they do have comments, once we get the hearing open, it'll allow them to contribute those as part of the record.
Sure.
Yeah, Mike, there's two items. I looked what you did and you incorporated most of what we've been talking about. There's 2 items that I want to point out. One is if someone wants to have more than 10% impervious, there is a potential for appealing that. I didn't see that within what you wrote. And two, if someone comes in and wants to build a building on new land, be it combined lots or whatever, we wanted to default that to the existing land use regulations, not something special for the lakes. Those two items don't seem to be in what you wrote.
So,
I think the first one is covered by C, isn't it, Mike? What you were discussing?
the special permit allowance for up to 30% when it has been demonstrated that such design is in accordance with subsection 5 of the article. And so that is where they can go to you for a special permit, specifically if they're going to increase their coverage. And then related to the lot creation, this regulation is applying to the lots that were created when the subdivisions originally occurred many, many, many years ago. So that's why under minimum, the lot size, we're not including that, because the lots, the total universe of these properties exists. We know them, they were demonstrated on the map. So we're not going to be zoning raw land, which is eligible for subdivision as part of the Lake District.
So if I buy up multiple single small lots and want to put a new home on that, I'm
Right.
still going to default back to our existing land use regulations.
If you buy up 5 lots that are part of the area to be zoned as part of the Lake District, then you have 5 building lots. So you can make them bigger. That doesn't mean you have to default to the RA zone, because you've purchased 5 building lots and you're now combining them to be 1.
So my 2 cents worth is we should default to the RA zone. Because
Well,
we've
you
had,
can't, because they have a protected interest. I mean, they have a protected right through owning a non-conforming lot of record to develop that lot based on those standards. So if they have 5 individual lots and they want to develop to the new side yard setback of 10 feet, you can't say that because the lot has been made bigger, you now have to meet a different set of standards.
we've had numerous applications to build on combined lots that we've turned down in the past. And that's really what I'm referring to.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last month, and my interpretation of those decisions is that they were legal lots of record and they should not have been told that they couldn't build. I went over this a little bit with Ken when I referred this regulation to him, and I said, you know, were subdivisions that were created many, many years ago for very small lots, and there have been cases where these activities have been denied because the lots didn't meet the requirements, and he agreed that if it was a lot of record as demonstrated in the subdivisions for both lakes, that regardless of how small they are, if they can demonstrate, you know, that they didn't make them any smaller in between when the lot was created and when town adopted subdivision, the town can't say you can't build on it.
Does everyone agree with that?
I'm hesitant
Yes,
to, I'm hesitant to, because I see where you're going, Dick. If someone, again, you know, purchases these smaller lots, and 3 or 4 of them, and they qualify to the size or something close to a size of a lot in an RA zone, but we're end up applying the requirements of the Lake District on something that, for all intents and purposes, should have the RA requirements applied against it. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, I recall specifically with someone petitioning to build on like 3 or 4 combined lots. And we said, you know, you can sell them as lots that you can put a gazebo on, and then you can use the the beach and the boat dock and things like that, but you can't build a house on it.
Well, there is one landowner who has, and I can't remember, Alex, maybe you remember, has a number of very small lots that are deeded, but they are deeded that by the town that they cannot build on those. That's the way the deed reads, as opposed to going against zoning regulations or zoning, putting the kibosh on it. Is that what you're referring to, that group?
I think so. This was 2 or 3 years ago, as I
Yeah,
recall.
And they show up every 2 or 3 years or so with trying to plead their case for doing that. And, you know, it's in the deed, basically. It really doesn't have a zoning requirement on it. It's really the way the deed is.
It's a deed restriction.
Right.
So I'm happy to try to, I mean, I can ask Ken if he's available to attend the next meeting. We've got, based on what we're going to talk about later on in the agenda, you know, I'll be having to work with him. But, you know, that is a protected right through statute. So we're not, we're not really negotiating that right. If someone has 5 lots and they want to build 5 houses, or they want to buy 5 lots and they want to build 1 house and combine them, there's no regulation that the town can create that says, well, now that you're trying to make them bigger, you have to meet a separate standard. There's actually a legal doctrine called the doctrine of merger, which basically in some towns, if you have non-conforming lots of record, which are contiguous and under common ownership, there are some towns which deem them to be automatically combined. And that, again, is a whole nother legal issue, but there's nothing anybody can do. If somebody bought 5 lots and they wouldn't come to the commission for anything. They'd say, Mike, I bought 5, I combined them, I want to put up a house.
Yeah.
And they'd come in for a building permit.
Yeah, Mike, I would ask you to look at the Coventry language that I've sent to you before. And
I've read it.
and see if that might apply to what we're talking about. I mean, we really don't want to stop people from doing something that would be applicable and approved for septic and things with the Eastern Highlands. But we have kind of taken a stance on this in the past. And, you know, the idea is that we don't want to put more houses on small lots.
Well, can I just say, you're talking about people building on several lots, so it wouldn't necessarily be a really small lot, and they'd still only be able to have 10% coverage. So I'm not quite sure why that's a problem.
That's a good point, Janet.
In the eyes of the zoning regulations, they would be moving to a position which is less non-conforming because the lot would be bigger. So their coverage would go down, their setbacks would become better, their impervious area would become better because the area of the lot is getting larger. So, you know, those types of issues wouldn't likely come up. But you know, I'm happy to try and put together some type of an outline to memorialize my conversation with Ken, or something that you can follow it. But to the extent that this has been done in the past, you know, we certainly don't want to keep moving in a direction if it's not correct.
You know, the logic that I put forth is in the rest of the town. If I want to build a house in an RA zone, I've got a certain amount of requirements. But if I'm going to build a house in the Lake District, I'm going to have different requirements. And if that's what we want to do, that's fine. We should approve that. But we should at least consider that relative to what we're approving in the rest of the town.
But when I'm very happy with the fact that both Janet and Mike got it down to my rudimentary understanding for you know, what this means when you actually apply a house to these smaller combined lots and what the requirements are, the 10% coverage, better setbacks than were there probably before for the size of the lot.
So I think I've shown this before, but this is the approved subdivision map, which was
Right.
created for Lake Chaffee. This was filed in, I don't know if the date is on here, and I know,
54.
yeah, so this predates subdivision. So if you look, some of these lots, you know, they're basically 50 by 100, 50 by 95. When this map was filed, every single one of these lots became a legal lot of record and has the ability to put a house on it from a zoning perspective. The only way that a zoning person, whether it be an attorney, a ZEO, or a commissioner, can say that you can't put a house on this lot is if they made it smaller. If they made it bigger, or if they kept it the same size, even if they wait 100 years, the minute this map got filed in the land records and was executed, it became a protected, legal, non-conforming lot of record. So even though they don't meet the setbacks or lot size, they can still build. Now, where this gets a little bit more complicated is if it predates subdivision, they have the protection for building, but they don't have a protection against the subdivision standards which were in place at the time, because there weren't any, which means they still have to meet front yard setback, side yard setback. And so in many cases, they may not meet that. In some cases, they might, or they may go to the ZBA. If you have a subdivision that's filed while we have subdivision regs and they don't do anything with it, they're protected under the standards which were in place at that time. But for all of these lots, if they have 5 lots, they can build 5 houses if they can demonstrate all the other standards, and they still have to meet health, and they still have to do, you know, well and septics, you know, testing and that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Okay, Mike, to put my comments to bed, simply review what Coventry did relative to what you're proposing and come back with what you think is the right way to go.
I guess
Yeah.
I guess the only other question I have, and it comes up from Mr. Michelle's discussion or request or input. We have a maximum building height. Does that include, I mean, do we need to change language to include any other structures or more specific language regarding other structures?
That's up to the commission. I mean, we had talked about limiting that height so that people wouldn't start putting 3rd stories on their house. If you
Right,
go to
right.
30 feet, you're looking at, you know, so he had said that I think his solar array, I'm imagining it's something that tracks the sun and has an angle. I wasn't here when it was approved, but if it's going to exceed 25 feet in height, I mean, frankly, in this is, you know, nothing more than an opinion. If you have a lot that's a couple thousand square feet, a 25-foot solar array would cast an awfully large shadow on the neighbor. And so if you're not meeting those setbacks, it may not be something that the commission's overly excited about encouraging, particularly when, you know, you can put them on a rooftop. But it's not really something that we've gotten into, you know, as far as the regs that we have right now don't really address something like solar.
In general, the feedback we got from Lake Chaffee and Ashford Lake was they didn't want to see people building a house 3 stories tall or anything that would block the view of the lake if they were one row back. So I would say, you know, 60-70% of the people that responded to the survey felt that. So I think protecting that for the people 1 row back is important. And whether it's a solar array or a 3rd story in the house, it still blocks the view of the lake.
I would agree with that, with Richard.
I would definitely agree with that also.
Okay. Mr. Michelle, how large is your planned array?
Takes a moment to unblock my
That's okay.
microphone. The array that you guys approved is about 32.5 feet high.
Okay.
So if it's vertical, that's how high it'll be. Of course, most of the time it's not vertical. It's at an angle to the sun. So that's the maximum height.
It has a maximum of 32.5.
In our particular situation, there's nobody behind us. There's only trees, although, you know, there's one lot behind us, which is a very small lot. I don't know whether it'll ever be built on or not.
Okay.
But we're not in the situation that right now we would be blocking anybody's view of the lake with it.
Okay.
And
Thank
one
you.
of the things that we should point out is that if Mr. Michelle wants to do that, he can go in front of the zoning boards of appeal to have whatever the regulations are repealed.
Yeah, I think that's sort of reasonable. The reason it has to be high is because it has to be behind the house, because the house is on a non-conforming lot, it's right forward on the lots. There's no point that you can't put the array in front of the house to get the sun. So it's got to go higher behind the house to get the sun. That's the reason for it, the height of it anyway.
And I know you went through multiple presentations regarding zoning board of appeals, even for getting it in, and then you got, I believe you got the allowance from either, I don't know if it was Eastern Highlands or some other group due to the, in where you're able to plan to put it now. There was something about the, I can't remember if it was the loose material or drainage or something around it.
Yeah, let me explain. You've touched on 2 points there. The first location I chose was out with the zoning regulations, and the zoning board of appeals didn't think I had a compelling argument to put it there. So I moved the proposed location of the array further behind the house. I had to cut more trees down and all that type of stuff. But what that meant is it was closer to my leach field of the
That's
septic
right.
system. Because it was closer, I had to get approval from Eastern Highlands to put it there so as not to damage the leach field in any way. And they approved it with a few stipulations that were easy to deal with. So those were the two situations. Now, I think that the new zoning regs you're proposing, I think it's the 10-foot one or 20-foot. I think that would have allowed me to put the pole where I originally proposed.
Sure. Day late and a dollar short. Sorry about that.
No, that's no problem. Where it's going now, I mean, I can't move back to the original proposed place because the concrete's already in the ground, but it's fine. It's going to be fine where it is as far as I'm concerned.
Jeff, I think in terms of the regulation, we should allow what has happened with Mr. Michelle to be a zoning board of appeal issue.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Not
yes.
something that would be baked into the regulations.
Oh, yes. Oh, no, absolutely. I was just trying to get clarification because I knew he had jumped through some hoops before on this. Okay.
Now, our Lake District reg doesn't propose to create a new category of accessory use bulk standards, which means, or accessory structure. So anything that qualifies as an accessory structure based on the existing regulations, these, if they're within the Lake District, they would still have to meet those standards. We're not proposing to modify that.
Right. Okay. All right. So, Mike, you've already passed these on to Ken. You're waiting to get his feedback on that, correct?
Yep, and when I speak with him, I will go over the legal lot of record issue.
Okay, and if there is, obviously, you probably won't send this out if there's anything major, he comes upon, I doubt there will be, but unless there's something major and you need to take it back to the board, you'll follow through with sending to the Lake Districts as well as CROG and NECOG.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, so Mike, the next step is go to everyone for comment. After that, let's go to public hearing to adopt it.
Yep.
very good. Thank you, Mike. Okay, next on the agenda, unfinished business, affordable housing plan update. So we are in the final year. In order to have something for, the timeframe is June or July, the required plan of affordable housing for Ashford to develop. And again, we have contracted with Mike's group. We did put in for a grant. Mike submitted a grant application toward the 15,000 allowable. I don't know, did we do the full sum, Mike?
Yep.
And have we heard back anything as of yet?
No, the expectation is that they will make the announcement in September.
September, okay. However, we did also budget funds towards dealing with this. So we do, I mean, if we get the grant, we save the town some money. If we don't, we have funds put aside in the budget for contracting for this. So we're covered either way, which is great. It'd be great to get the grant, obviously. And one of the things that we talked about early on with this is that plan of affordable housing is not necessarily a planning and zoning initiative. It is a town initiative. And to that end, though we might be spearheading this because of the planning and zoning implications of the plan of affordable housing, we're looking to have a group come together, subcommittee, if you will, to work with Mike and his company for gaining direction, mainly giving insight, and really, allowing his group to really use a template to put together what Ashford wants to do, and guiding us when it comes to things like the housing list, efforts for definitions regarding what makes for affordable housing and things like this, and maybe some ideas that are gleaned from other towns he's worked with to meet the move forward in gaining affordable housing percentage in the town, which is all part of what the plan is requesting of us. So obviously we'd be looking for member or members of planning and zoning to be with his. How handy that Jessica is on, because we would like to have someone from the Housing Authority join the meeting. We've talked about having maybe someone from Special Services be available for input, as well as, and I got to thinking about this, Mike, too. I was thinking, maybe the agent for the elderly would be someone to join the committee if there's an interest there. Potentially a member of Board of Finance to be on here to make sure that, and report back to the Board of Finance and what it means, what effectively might be coming down the pike for the budget or something like that, should there be a budget issue, and potentially a member of the Board of Selectmen, if they could be on this as ex officio member, just to oversee, and if there's anything that needs to be submitted, such as, we have the opt-outs that are in there that we have to discuss, and those need to go through the legislative body of the town, which is the Board of Selectmen. So that's kind of the group. I don't know if anyone has any other input as to members or groups that would be helpful or effective in putting together a plan and helping to consult and guide Mike's company.
Jeff, when we come to the right point of the discussion of the opt-out issue, we'd like to weigh in on that.
Sure.
Excuse me, what did you want to weigh in on?
It's the potential opt-out options, OPT.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, Mike, obviously, you potentially might be spearheading some of this unless you want one of the members of the group to do that, when the group comes together. But I'm thinking of, potentially starting with monthly meetings that allow for, either, gaining assignments or getting input from those people, those members of the group. And then obviously, whoever is attending this meeting, we'd be looking for reports back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and their own commissions also, but back to the Planning and Zoning Commission as to the status besides Mike's updates that we see.
We usually set it up, as a bit of an advisory group. It's kind of a bunch from people from all over. The process, there are points where check-ins may need to be more frequent depending on if we're in like the public outreach phase. And then when we're in the drafting phase, it may take more time. So we tend to meet as needed based on availability and where we're meeting. But we look to get these things in about 3 months is an average, 3 to 4 months is an average start to finish time frame. So there will be points in time where we do meet more frequently.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
Mike, when we were doing the plan of conservation development, affordable housing was one of the items we spent quite a bit of time on with NECOG. Didn't really come up with much of a resolution other than the fact that Ashford, along with 169 other towns, were woefully behind the curve with what the state wanted. Are we going to see something different than that?
So we're not, you're not going to see something different from that because you're still way behind. But in an area like Ashford, you're unlikely to see a strong amount of pressure from developers to come in and bring in 8-30G affordable housing appeals because we don't have the sewer capacity, we don't have the population demand, we don't have proximity to infrastructure and jobs and all these other things, right? So we're not seeing what Stamford and other places are seeing. But so really a lot of our work needs to focus on how we maintain or increase the attainability of the housing stock we have so that as residents that live here want to age in place, the housing stock that they are more interested in is available. So it's a twofold conversation.
The senior housing stock counts as affordable housing?
yes,
Correct.
What about the apartments in town?
they're not deeded to maintain their cost and all that. So I'm sorry, Mike, I'm stealing your thunder here.
No,
And the same goes for the in-law apartments, unless they're deeded as affordable housing, they're not going to count.
correct. However, there is a term called NOAA, which is naturally occurring affordable housing, which is basically this idea that even though it's not deed restricted, it's still serving that same category because it's in line with those numbers. So, there may be a case where you have a number of units which are in a rental spot which people find to be attainable. Yes, they're not deed restricted, but they're still serving a need. So that's something that we'll look at.
Yeah, because most of the rental in-law apartments in town that I'm aware of are, I would rather think that most of the people owning those would not put deed restrictions on their properties. I'll take his point in case the basement apartment that Ralph Fletcher has on his property.
It's unlikely that any of those are deed restricted because they need to be for a period of 40 years. Ashford has roughly 1,900 living units and 68 of them were considered to be assisted. 32 of those were government assisted and 36 of them were CHFA USDA mortgages. So again, It's not just apartments. If you have a CHFA backed mortgage, that qualifies. And so part of what this may include is educating realtors to make sure everybody understands what types of mortgages are available. So a new family that's eligible for CHFA or USDA mortgage, if they go that route, even if they're buying, a bigger house on a big lot, because of the way those mortgages are backed, they qualify as affordable housing units.
Thank you.
Jeff, I'm
Yes, Chair.
back. I got cut off again.
Oh, sorry, Jerry. Thank you. Okay, so that was basically kind of the update we were talking about. I didn't know if, Mike, you had anything else to discuss on this. I'm trying to figure out maybe the best way is to do a combined letter or ask the Board of Selectmen to reach out to those boards and try to gain volunteers and maybe by the date in September, it's August now, maybe by the end of September, have a group put together. We'll also know about the grant, hopefully by then. But I will reach out to the Board of Selectmen, asking them to put a letter together, or I'll draft a letter and have them approve it for requesting volunteers from the various boards that we identified. All right. Anything else on affordable housing plan at this point? Thank you.
Mike, is there anything in writing you can share with the commission?
Anything in writing related to what?
The work in progress on the affordable housing plan?
Yeah, no, so we haven't started anything because the scope of the project will be dependent on any of the grant funds that the town acquires. So we have a process that we go through to make sure that we're including everything that has been identified as being there's an affordable housing guidebook that's developed by Department of Housing. But the ultimate scope of the project and the various details will be identified once we get the grant and kind of pull the trigger.
And again, as I said, if we don't get the grant, then if we do get the grant, we don't have to exhaust funds out of the budget. If we don't get the grant, there are funds there and available to us. Okay, going to new business. The adult use of cannabis discussion. I do want to mention, this is again something that Mike was influential in saying, we should bring up. It's not redundant, but it's also part of the legislative review staff memo that's in Part B, but it's a much larger section. And I do want to give credit to Dick Williams from earlier, because he had brought this up as an issue for us to discuss, and we kind of, for lack of a better term, tabled it at the time. But we do see a number of towns doing many different actions when it comes to the legislation that was passed in July for the recreational use of cannabis and what that means to retail growth, production, as well as personal use. I tried to get some input, and I still need to find out whether, and it's not probably in our due course, it's probably in the selectmen's due course, but it has to do with public smoking. Public smoking in general of anything, or really cigarettes and such, but tobacco products, but also applying those same rules for the use of cannabis in our parks. And obviously you can't in public buildings and all of that, but what areas are allowable, what aren't. That's kind of an offshoot of this. So again, many of you read the paper, many of you see that some towns are putting a moratorium on retail outlets for recreational cannabis use. Some, I know of one town, it's kind of interesting, they're actually doing, the town member is trying to do a petition, and it's not a petition for having retail, it's a petition for not having the board decide, the commission decide, but have the public decide. The petition is looking to get it on the referendum for November, and let the public decide as to whether it should be allowable or not to make it allowable, but to have the people say what it is. I think that's in Southington. I think that's where they're doing that. And then there are some groups that are looking at it as an expanse of the current medical marijuana sites that they have in their town already. And others are embracing. I actually think the list of 35 towns that were granted likely positions of licensing was released this week. And I think our closest was Wyndham and Vernon were the two closest towns to our area for that. So I give that preface and open it up for discussion as to the board's feelings on this and
Yeah,
well,
Jeff,
any actions we should go.
is it 2 cents worth? I drive to Sturbridge frequently because it's the closest place for me to shop and buy gas. There's at least 4 or 5 billboards advertising cannabis sales. The one that I get the biggest kick out of is right opposite of Yankee Spirits, the liquor store. So it's right there. Massachusetts is saying, okay, hey, Connecticut, you've legalized this thing, come up here and you can buy it here. I'm a product of the 60s, and I won't talk about what I did in the 60s, but I can talk about what I do in the present time. I don't, but people are doing it and they're going to do it. So if we can manage to have an economic impact on the town by permitting it, since we're right next to the border, it might be something we should consider.
And I'll say, I've been in the Berkshires recently, and there's a number of retail establishments in some of the small towns. And they seem to be very well run. They look nice. I don't know if there's any problems with them, but they seem to fit into the retail areas pretty well.
The kind of thing I would think about is that if you put a retail establishment on exit 72, it would take some of the business away from Massachusetts.
Okay. Any other input? Any other discussion? Again, I'd really like
Hey,
to get
Jeff.
the board's feelings. Yes, Jeff.
Jeff, my 2 cents is, I kind of agree.
I'm up
with
to
Dick
4
on this
cents
one.
now. 4 cents. One more, I can get a stick of bubble gum. Go ahead.
All right, add a penny and we'll call it a nickel.
All right.
So, I agree with Dick. The state legislature has determined that this is a legal activity. And I think we should take advantage of that. And, we're looking for business opportunities in the town to increase our tax base. Why not support that? And let the local law enforcement deal with any, illegal issues that the commission might be concerned with.
You want to give more work to the Ashford constables?
No, but
I'm being a smart ass. I'm just being, we don't have Ashford constables. We have no police.
I know. Well, my point is that the state legislature has determined this is a legal activity and is no different than, operating a package store. So why should we discourage it?
Now, there are some things that are out there. Thank you, Jeff, for that. There are some towns out there that one of the other limitations or whatever is looking at where in town they can have these establishments put in. limiting it to certain commercial districts or commercial areas outside of, a certain distance from school zones and things like this. Obviously it's the requirement, just like cigarettes is, over 21 at this point. But
Jeff, I would say limit to the area around exit 72.
so you're talking the industrial, the II?
Well, it's industrial, but it's also, it goes up and down that access road, not just the big industrial area, but there is areas around that area that could be, used. I don't think we would want to promote it in Warrenville, let's say. But if it's on exit 72, it doesn't have any impact on the town.
I think it's more like package stores, and we've got some empty storefronts that we're looking to fill in the Warrenville area. So I'm not really opposed to allowing it there.
I would say let the market determine where these places end up going.
So you're saying no limitations, Jeff, basically.
No, not exactly.
Oh.
But they should be in, wherever, the retail zones are. Those are the type of markets that people are going to be using for this.
Yeah, and there are no buildings at exit 72. And there's a lot of empty buildings in Ashford, in the Orangeville area.
There's less empty buildings than you might think. Most all of the post office building is occupied now. Most all of the Piss product building is occupied, and the old Ashford Butcher building is occupied with exception of one slot. So most everything up and down exit on 74 is all occupied, with the exception of some of the industrial areas on the right-hand side there. So we're not as empty as you might think we are.
If there aren't, I'm not aware of commercial. You have a better handle on it, obviously, with the economic development, but in the post office, I'm only aware of the post office as a commercial outlet in there. There's other items in there now?
Yeah, there's a fellow that sells and resells antiques that's occupying about 1.5 of the slots. And then the Lunch and Tiger folks have taken over what was the old deli part. So the entire post office thing is totally occupied right now.
I thought Lunch and Tiger was in the Mr. Butcher.
They moved. They moved down to
They
that.
did move out. Oh,
And the Piss products, I think there's one slot that's unoccupied, but the rest of it's all occupied right now.
right, right.
And then we have the what used to be the stonemason guys that sold a place across the street there.
Right,
And
yeah, central transport's in there.
yeah, they're totally occupied with selling U-Hauls. And then you go up the street to the Ask Mr. Busher, and you have most everything there occupied, selling. Right now, they're selling portable buildings. So most of Route 74 is all occupied with stuff. What's not as occupied is going out 44. RM's is unoccupied. Parts of the old equipment place across from the Mormon church is unoccupied. But we have less unoccupied in Ashford than you'd think about these days.
No, I'm thinking, yeah, but I do understand Jerry's point that a pre-existing building is probably, well, I guess it all depends on how much you're investing in business. But yeah, as Jeff said, let the market bear out where they would move into. But I guess, again, any other limitations on anything? Again, you'd want them to be in the commercial areas. Is it NIMBY? Not in my backyard. You know, I'd love to have them, but not in my RA zone. I mean, do we have any considerations there?
Is this something that we should ask the town to weigh in on before we make a decision?
It's, in most cases, it's planning and zoning dealing with that. As elected representatives of the town, not trying to throw our weight around or anything, but that's usually the case. Again, to your point, Janet, we have no limitations on package stores, I believe, except for the commercial zones they can go into. There's no limitations on any of those. So why would we have other limitations, at least in the commercial zones and or in the industrial interstate zone? So I suppose.
So Jeff, I would rather see them at exit 72, but I'm perfectly okay with seeing them any place in a commercial zone in town.
Okay.
So if I could just jump in, a couple of things that I think are important. The law says that if the regulations are silent on how these uses are to be treated, that they are to be basically evaluated as a similar use or establishment. And from what we understand from the drafters of the bill, they're talking, about liquor retail and other things. So if we're silent, then we will look to our zoning regulations as they are written now to determine the most similar type of use, whether you're talking about retail. There are a number of basic types. You have, I think there's 8. You have a cultivator, micro cultivator, retail, hybrid retail, product manufacturer, food and beverage manufacturer, packager, delivery service, and transporter. So basically, if we don't create any regulations that say anything about it, we have to treat those uses as we would if they were doing the same thing with another type of product. So that some towns that feel that it's not that big a deal don't have to then create regulations. The one thing that some towns are looking at, I don't know where they've gone with it, but is the growing. It's the growing of cannabis is not expressly allowed in the right to farm statutes. There's a carve out for that. So we obviously allow ag pretty much everywhere. So someone could not say, I have a farm, I'm just going to start growing this because it's ag. You'd have to look at the regs. The one thing that some people are concerned about is cannabis stinks, hemp stinks. And if you have a facility or a farm that's growing this right along a neighborhood, it smells bad. Just something to think about.
So I was trying to look up a number of different issues regarding the growth and supply of cannabis and or hemp. I did see it to even start growing it at a commercial or retail venture. It was like $750,000 for a license, as I understand it, $250,000 for a retail license.
Well, and the other thing, I guess, is that there are caps. You get one establishment per license type per 25,000 people, which means Ashford can only have one retailer, one cultivator, one transporter. It's not as if we can be overrun with these types of things. Massachusetts has 124 towns which have banned cannabis businesses, 188 which allow it, and 39 which are in between. They have a total of 146 retail stores and 40 cultivators. The preliminary assessment is that for something like, hold on, I'm trying to go back through all my notes. For something like a cultivator, which is going to be, would generate, I think they're projecting roughly $4 million in annual revenue each for these types of establishments. And I don't know the citing, but they're estimating that would come back to the town in about $120,000 in municipal tax revenue. So there is some they are planning that, but we're not going to be overrun because our population will cap us.
So along those lines, I'm sorry, go ahead, Janet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask if, have towns put in regulations for setbacks for the hemp fields to protect neighbors?
So after the law was created, or after this passed, the guidance from many land use attorneys and firms that represent municipalities was to basically enact a temporary moratorium. So this is in effect now. Someone could come in tomorrow and say, I want to get a change of use to a retail shop in the plaza, on 74, and it's already in play. And so there was some concern, well, we have to think about this. We don't know. We don't want these folks to come in ahead of time. So there are a number of towns which have enacted or in the process of enacting a moratorium to then have this discussion. There are some towns which have gone through the ordinance process because the law allows for an ordinance to go through an all-out prohibition. And we learned last week that an ordinance would supersede anything this commission does. And so I think there are some towns which feel that planning and zoning may be more open-minded, but the legislative body, council, board of selectmen don't feel the same way. And if you were to create regulations to allow these things, but the town were to pass an ordinance through town meeting to prohibit it, that would supersede any of the regs that you have to allow it. So everybody's all over the place, has created a bit of a fire drill. But I will tell you that the guidance from Haller and Sage was put a moratorium in place and take the time to figure out how you want to deal with it.
Jeff, is there any motion within the Board of Selectmen to create an ordinance?
Not as far as I know. Nothing's been discussed at any of their meetings or anything like that.
I think it would be a good idea to put in a temporary moratorium and have further discussion on how we want to handle this.
Is that a motion, Janet?
It could be, yes. Will be a motion.
This is Mark Schnobel. I'd second that motion.
Amen.
Okay, did you capture that, Valerie?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all those in favor in a moratorium? And Mike, do we need to set a time frame on that, or?
So you have to, you establish a moratorium just like you do a zoning regulation. So I will do a referral and you will adopt it at a subsequent meeting. Even if I got it out tomorrow, I think we're probably going to miss the September meeting because I need to give them 35 days. But it would become part of the regulations. I think some towns are looking at 6 months, is a rough time frame when you talk about potentially if you want to create regulations.
Yeah, Mike, I would say 3 months would be fine.
Well, if we make it for 6 months and we're ready early, can we make our recommendations and get rid of the moratorium?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it'd be safer to do 6 months, and then if we're ready, we can just move ahead.
And
So I'll
6
make that
months,
motion.
and 6 months still puts us outside of when retail is allowed in Connecticut for, what is it, April of 22, I believe. So, so the motion on the floor is to place a moratorium on retail sales of cannabis, recreational retail cannabis in Ashford for a 6-month period. And that's been seconded, or that's the motion. Thank you, Janet.
Mhm.
And do we have a second on that motion, just to be clear?
Second,
It
Schnobel.
was Mark, I think. Mark seconded.
Correct. correct.
Okay. All those in favor of the 6-month moratorium?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, I guess we'll move forward with that, Mike.
So I'll draft the moratorium language and refer it to NECOG. And then you'll schedule it for formal adoption. Like I said, 35 days won't get us to the meeting in September. So I guess you can push it to October, or you can push your meeting back in September to a special so that we have the 35 days. I'll leave that up to you, but I will refer that tomorrow.
Or maybe we will end up doing that, making it a special meeting, moving it off of, well, the 6th is Labor Day, so there's one day to the 7th, but we could always move it off. What would we need, a week or 2 weeks?
If I refer it, today's the 9th, so if I refer it on the 10th, and I need to give them 35 days.
21.
That puts us to September 14th is the absolute earliest.
So I guess if you get it out tomorrow, then we could do the 14th. That'll dictate it. If you do get it out tomorrow, then we'll go with the 14th. If not, we'll move it back. We'll move it back to like the 20th, Monday, the 20th, a special meeting.
Okay, I'll look at that and I should be able to get that taken care of. Shouldn't be that big of a deal. I have some draft language that I pulled together
Okay.
just in case.
All
I'll
right,
confirm.
very good.
This is Mark Noble. I have one quick question along these lines. You mentioned at the beginning about smoking in parks, and the state does ban it. Is that part of the purview of planning and zoning to ban it in parks?
No, I'm pretty sure that has to go with the selectman's office on that. And I do have a request in the selectman's office as to what the regulation is for just, again, tobacco smoking in the town parks, which include Pompey Hollow, include the Memorial Park.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, the legislative review staff memo. And that should be something that everyone's had a chance to review. That Mike included in the meeting materials. If I could just find my stack here. Here we go. Okay, so do I just give you the floor again, Mike, or do you want me to review this? How do you want to go about this?
Basically, what I tried to do was just pull together a brief summary to outline the important changes following the legislative session as they relate to planning and zoning, and kind of outline what our regulations say and whether or not we're in compliance. As you'll see, there are a number of things that we are in compliance with, and then other things that we're not. So the idea would be, and I realize I'm giving myself more work to do. The idea would be that we roll, some of these changes into text amendments, and many of them are very simple. Outdoor dining by right, that's a very simple tweak. Removing the minimum floor area, very small tweak. ADUs as of right, very small tweak. So there's not a lot of work, but I wanted you to kind of see what the law requires and what our regulations say, and try to make it a little bit clearer than the 900-page implementer bill that the state passed.
Thank you for saving us the 900 page. Okay, so if we just look at the couple of these things that are on here, the outdoor dining by right, as you said, is not a big change. So we just would do a regulation change. And for that regulation change, we don't need a hearing on that, correct?
We do.
Oh, we do need a hearing.
Yep.
If we change the regulations, requires a hearing.
Okay, I was thinking it was the ordinance. Oh, I know, I'm thinking about our fees, because our fees has language that allows us to change our fees without a hearing
Yeah.
as part of our regs.
Yeah, fees are outside of the
Yep.
regs. in
Yep.
there in an ordinance.
Yep. So then we move our way down, childcare, mobile manufacturing, minimum floor area. So yeah, I saw this in there a couple of times, where a minimum floor area for dwellings,
I mean,
Okay. so we have something. But you're saying that, we should not be setting a minimum floor area. Isn't that the way it reads?
correct.
Okay.
So you can't tell someone how big a housing unit has to be.
We just went up from 756 or whatever it was to 900, didn't we, before?
I can't remember, but yeah, I mean, we did talk about this through the last set of revisions.
Right.
We went down on our last revision.
We're at maybe 1100.
I think so. We went down to 900.
Oh, okay. Well, we can't tell anyone anything, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we're looking at now, the idea that to build anything new is so expensive, to tell someone they need to build 900 square feet if they only want to build 750, puts more of a financial burden on them.
And the health department has requirements, don't they, that you have to meet, so you can't build a closet and say it's your house.
Yeah, I mean, if you meet all the applicable, I don't know if the health department would tell you how small, if something couldn't be a certain size. If you have, there are, in many cases, I don't think we have one here, a housing code specifically related to dwelling units that have, apartments and other things. There are certain things you need to have access to light and fresh air and windows, and you need to have a certain size for each unit. So the law is very clear that you can't tell them those things, but building code, housing code, any other applicable code book still is in play. This is not superseding any of those things. They still have to demonstrate insulation values and heat and air and roof and all those other things.
Yeah, the key thing that Eastern Highlands looks at are the number of bedrooms and the number of bathrooms and how big the septic needs to be to accommodate that. And that's their prime requirement for approving the lot. So that's out of our purvey at all.
Okay, so that's two items, two regs that need to be changed. Moving on to the character issue on the second page. Shall not cite as district's character as approval or denial criteria. Well, we do have that type of statement in there. We just can't use it for our decisions. Do we feel we need to either remove or better define, which I think is what the requirement is, to have a stronger, more definitive definition?
In looking at this, I'm split. I guess it's all about how much you trust yourselves. We can regulate density, patterns of development. We can regulate the tangible physical aspects of design and construction. So if you were to say, I don't think that, putting 100 houses here is appropriate because this is, a rural community, and I feel that 75 would be more appropriate, it's okay to cite the fact that Ashford is a rural community. But if you say, I don't think this multifamily housing project is a good thing for Ashford because we're a rural community, that's not an okay thing to say. The difference is, as long as it's tied to a tangible design criteria, density, height, location, setback, whatever, then that's okay. Because an engineer can go back to the drawing board and say, okay, they don't like the layout. I got to adjust the layout. And so it's really more about transparency and making sure that the applicants understand what the commission's perspective is. Does that make sense?
So a statement of, I don't like it because it doesn't meet or saying no because it's not the rural character doesn't fly.
Nope.
But saying, if you scaled it down to only 75, if it's not as big and thus affecting the character, that's acceptable.
Correct.
You need that more definitive response, that more definitive reason.
Because you're tying your comments to a very concrete part of the application. In this case, that you're talking about would be density.
Right. So in what you've seen and what we have, again, it's not making any decision. It's just more of a descriptor right now, but we can't use it to make a board decision. A definitive board, well, basically, yeah, making a decision board one way or the other based on rural character.
Right. And so I'm not, this on its face does not strike me as something that we need to be overly concerned about. If we were in a position where folks didn't like something and they were saying, doesn't fit the character of Ashford, we would just talk to them about explaining what they mean by that so we could get all that onto the record. We could have that conversation. I don't think this is like we got to change this right away.
Right. Okay. Moving on to the accessory dwelling unit. Looks like we need a change here.
Yes.
Okay. And this is where I think, Dick, you wanted to touch upon the opt-out. Excuse me, Dick, did you hear me? Lost him for a second.
While we're waiting for Dick, could you maybe explain the next one, the max floor area cannot be less than 30%? Is that 30% of the main building?
Yeah. So basically, this is all about the ratio between the accessory apartment and the main home. There were regulations all across the board which said how big or small something could be. And so they wanted to add this in so that towns wouldn't say, well, yes, you can have an accessory dwelling unit by right, but it needs to be 1,500 square feet. And so the idea is basically to set the threshold to a percentage of the size of the structure or 1,000 square feet. And so our regulation says that we currently require at least 500 square feet and for it to only be within an existing dwelling. So we have to modify that.
So we can't give them a minimum size, but we can give them a maximum size.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I think Dick is, oh, he's still here. We lost someone, but I wasn't sure if it was him.
I think Susan left.
I think Susan left.
And then,
Dick, are you with us yet? Okay, go ahead, Michael.
the only other one that's on there is the affordable housing plan, which we talked about. Everything else we're in pretty good shape on.
And we just discussed the cannabis piece.
Yep. And there's a little outline at the bottom for what the opt-out process is. I don't know of any towns in this area, I haven't been following it too closely, that have opted out of accessory dwelling units. That's not seen as something that's frankly very controversial. There was a temporary healthcare structures bill which came through 4 or 5 years ago, which is very similar to that, which towns could opt out of, but that was a different process because they were inherently, as it was called, temporary. The attached and detached accessory dwelling units by right simply means they come through staff. It doesn't mean they can do whatever they want. So you can still put specific criteria that you're asking them to meet, as far as location or max size, or, it needs to be served by the same driveway. There are a lot of requirements that you can include. It just means if they meet the requirements, they come in and get an approval through me, like you would a detached garage. But I don't want anybody to think that this means they have the ability to build whatever they want, wherever they want. And I think that's probably it.
Okay. So I'm not inclined to opt out, obviously. And I know we don't have Dick here to make his case or state his opinion on this. But we do have time on that too. I think is it December of next year or something like that?
Yeah, we do have some time, and we have a number of other, obviously, regulation changes that are in the hopper. So
Right.
once we get through Lake District stuff, I can put together some proposed language. I think that if the commission has a specific way that they're feeling related to the ADUs, it requires consensus with the legislative body, which means if the Board of Selectmen doesn't agree, then it doesn't happen. So I think that and frankly, I'm hoping the answer is no. I'm hoping that everybody is in support of this. But if the commission decides that they want to opt out, my recommendation would be that you send in a letter of intent to the Board of Selectmen to see if they would even support it. Because if they don't, then we got to get cracking on a reg anyway.
Right. It's as I said before, it's up to them to for that body to decide.
Right.
Okay.
Can I just say I'm totally in favor of the affordable housing plan, and that people who spend more than 30% of their income on housing are at risk of becoming homeless. And we have 29% of Ashford residents in that category, and 14% of our residents spend more than half their income on housing. So I think it's important that we do something to make housing more affordable.
Thank you, Janet.
Mhm.
All right. That being said, so Mike, not for next meeting, potentially not even the next meeting after it, but sometime in the late fall, we'll have some language developed that we can look at.
Yeah, I'll when I get some of the other stuff scheduled, I'll start working through some proposed text changes. And when we get them pulled together, we can workshop them and then do the referral.
Okay.
These are not big, heavy things. So I should be able to get something pretty quick.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, this is just your meeting tonight, Mike. What can I say? All right, I need a motion to go into executive session at this point.
So moved.
Enforcement from Janet. Second,
Second, Alex.
second from Alex. All approve, all in favor, say aye.
Amen.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna pull everybody in, pause the recording, and then anybody who isn't on the commission can hang here. So you're gonna get a pop-up to go into a breakout room.
Okay, we're going into executive session at 8:44. Back, Valerie.
I think we lost all of our guests.
Well, we're at the end here. I don't know if Mike has much more of a zoning officer report to give.
Nope, that's it.
You're done. All right, so we've come to the end. A motion to adjourn.
Amen.
Did I see a motion?
Motion.
Motion from Dick Williams. Is there a second? Second from Jeff Schillinger. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you for the decision on the meeting, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mike.
Take care.